was insane how much I could hate someone I was so madly in love with. My emotions were all over the place. However, I had no compassion for how he was feeling. Then one night, it all came to a head when he went to rub my belly and I shoved him away. He was sick of it. So I can't touch you now. Why are you even touching my stomach? I exclaimed. You act like you don't even care. That's our baby. That's us. We created that and you act like you don't even care. I can't afford to care, I screamed, trying to hold back tears. Caring about you or this relationship period has been nothing but painful. You don't give a fuck about me. I'm just here, like fucking company. You've been lying to me about everything for the last month. The car, your job, the bills, money I gave you, everything. And now I'm supposed to believe that being pregnant changes anything. I don't. I see who and what you're committed to, and it's not me. I'm not taking care of you and a baby while you take care of everybody else you deem more important. Fuck that. As angry as I was, with tears now streaming down my face, I could finally see his pain. It was probably the first time I truly paused to see it. How could you say that? You really think I wouldn't take care of my baby? What kind of shit is that to say? He replied. I don't know what I think of you anymore. I jabbed back as I turned my back to him again and laid down in bed. The very next morning, my phone rang shortly before 8 a.m. I knew who it was. Nobody would ever call me that early in the morning unless someone was born or someone died. Since Greg's phone had been disconnected for over a month now because of non-payment, I grabbed my phone and tossed it to his side of the bed. You have to stop calling Tanya's phone so early in the morning. I'm not getting you cigarettes at 8 in the morning, he said in the most frustrating tone as he answered the call. His words were not received well. They bickered back and forth for another 5 minutes or so. I listened to him try to explain that we were asleep. He even sternly expressed that her nicotine habit shouldn't be our problem. It didn't do any good. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I could hear how upset I saw